Welcome to the Friday afternoon talk of Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata. While the news trends and social media are rife with the siege of the second wave of COVID-19 in India, Bengal is all heated up with the elections. Now that 8 rounds are over, opinion and exit poll results are showing very mixed responses. And only on May 2, we are going to see the mystery or the mystery is going to be unfolded on where Bengal is headed to. So with this as the backdrop, today's fact or the Friday afternoon talk entails a discussion on aspirational Bengal, a state bearing the brunt of 34 years of deindustrialization and 44 years of center-state feud, aptly described as conflictual federalism. What does Bengal essentially aspire? What are Bengal's expectations? Now, Deep Halder ponders on these questions in his book, Bengal 2021, An Election Diary. Now, while writing this book, Deep met me several times. And even while conducting the fieldwork for this book, in fact, at that point in time, I didn't really spell out, but I had an apprehension which I'm expressing today. The apprehension is that though Deep, apart from being a cherished journalist, prefers calling himself an oral historian. And his book, Blood Island, which is on the Maori Chapi massacre perpetrated by the left rule in Bengal, bears ample testimony of that. And I essentially reckon Blood Island as an important and classic documentation for the posterior. Then why has Deep chosen a topic that apparently seems transient in nature and might fade away over time? But it seemed that my apprehension is misplaced when I essentially read the book Bengal 2021. It will still bear a documentation of human needs, human ambitions, and human aspirations from political dispensations. The book also presents a cross section of motley characters from various hues of life, what they perceive of the past and present and the existing dispensation, and what they might expect from the dispensations to come. So this book therefore sets the tone for today's discussion. And that is precisely why the title of today's FAT is What Bengal Needs, Election 2021 and the Larger Political Dynamics. So on this note, I would also like to state here that though this particular discussion revolves around Deep Halder's book, Bengal 2021, An Election Diary, it is not confined to that only. The discussion will be more with the broader theme that Deep's book entails, that is essentially an aspirational Bengal. Therefore, the various socio-political economic drivers, the inherent legacy of the historical forces affecting our polity and governance, the broader forces of national political economy, the global geopolitics and geoeconomics, the inherent cultural dynamics shaping the intellectual makeover of the state of Bengal, and of course the comparative dynamics and the comparative statics of competitive, cooperative, and conflictual federalism that have essentially shaped the expectations and aspirations of the populace of the state. These are going to be the subjects of discussion. As you can make out that this panel consists of professionals from various hues of life. Deep, of course, Deep Halder, who happens to be the executive editor of India Today and an author. He had previously wrote the book, the Morichapi massacre, the Blood Island, which entails an account of something that has not been spoken of in public domain so far, but recently that has really become a different kind of, has led to a different kind of discourse as far as the mass genocide is concerned. Now that Bengal 2021 is here, that is setting the entire tone of this particular discussion. We also have with us Dr. Niranjan Sahoo, Senior Fellow of ORF, a very senior scholar on politics and governance who has been looking at the various drivers of the political discourse and the political economy, as also the elections for quite some time. Sreya Sarkar, a public policy expert who follows and of course actively writes and keenly observes Bengal politics. We have Koral Dasgupta, who is an author, and she has recently written the book Ahalya, and she's also the founder of hashtag Tell Me Your Story. And Ambar Ghosh of ORF Kolkata, who happens to be a political analyst, and he has recently authored the monograph on the Bengal elections, which was published just prior to the onset of the elections. So with this array of speakers, one can easily make out that what we are going to have are different contextual framings of the discourse of Bengal elections. So what I request the speakers is that to confine their presentations to 8 minutes initially, and after that we can have a second round with the questions and the responses. I would request the audience to ask your questions in the chat box. We can take up, we won't be in a position to take up all the questions, but we would like to take up, of course, selected questions. If at all we are not put in a position to take up all the questions, please don't get disheartened. We can take that up later on, in fact, in course of some other discussions. So let me first begin with Deep's interventions, especially because these interventions are going to set the background of backdrop of today's discussion. So Deep, it's my request that if you can talk about the book and eventually its postmark, to what extent essentially you feel that the tone of Bengal's election has been set, and to what extent your book has been able to capture the various voices as far as Bengal's aspirations are concerned. So over to Deep.
Thank you, Nilanjan, and thank you, ORF, for having me. It's an honor, as always, to be part of ORF Talks. When I say, you rightly mentioned, when I set out to write Bengal 2021 an election diary, I thought I was writing a quick book. Such books have been written in the past about various elections. Indian elections are extremely interesting. This was an important election, so I thought I'd write a quick book on the mood of Bengal before the all important assembly elections this year. This was last year. When I set out to write the book, Nilanjan, it almost became like a time travel. You know, it's like going back and forth in time. Why do I say this? I say this because in the course of my talks with various sections of society who I interviewed for the book, I realized how Bengal is still trapped in the past, and past that has not been resolved, and it is through that sphere that it's looking at the future. Also, one idea that this whatever the results day after tomorrow, one idea that has that is completely got destroyed this election is the idea of Bengali exceptionalism. That somehow the way Bengal feels is different from the rest of India. In one of the chapters, I speak to a journalist who says that, you know, we do not, at least certain kinds of Bengalis do not really identify themselves with the rest of India. We stay in India, but we we have no commonality with somebody from, say, Bihar or from Uttar Pradesh, or even from down south. But we would like to think that we are very close to the French in the way our culture is. And we are very westernized, and especially in Kolkata. Now, so this idea of Bengali exceptionalism has sort of gotten hit for a six. You know, with the rise of Mr. Modi in the center stage of Indian politics, and not really because of him, what happened was, I think, a vast number of Indians started feeling and saying also on Twitter and elsewhere through various books that you cannot define India through 2 years, 1947 and 1950. 1947 when India got free, and 1950 when the constitution came to the fore. I think large number of Indians thought and said that yes, the constitution is a very important document, but there are thousands of years of civilizational ethos that you have to keep in mind. You have to keep in mind, for instance, that there was an idea of India much before India became a free nation in 1947. There was an idea of India which a large number of Indians perhaps imagine as Bharat Mata. Now, when you get, so 1947 and 1950 can't be those 2 years that define India. And before that, you talk about British rule and the Islamic rule. There is an India before, much before, which you don't really regard in our discussions, but that India needs to, that civilizational ethos needs to come up. When you think of that, you realize that this idea itself was so powerfully felt and worded in Bengal. And when we say, and when we talk about Bengal, we really do not anymore. I mean, now we are, but all these years we didn't talk about that idea. When Bankim Chandra wrote Anandamot, the idea of Bharat Mata, it was his idea that later other luminaries brought forth. The fact, but like I said, when Indians talk about India, it's as if it's 1947 and 1950. When we talk about Bengal, we generally think of Bengal from 1977 onwards, and there was a few dates before 1947. Of course, partition in 1977, the left came to power. 34 years of the left rule. The idea of the Bengali as a high-thinking, default Marxist, who shunned money. So that's the idea of Bengal we have. But there was an idea of Bengal before, an idea of Bengal which now in this election, in Bengal election 2021, somehow is being felt along with the rest of India, which thinks of India as a pagans, as the only surviving pagan civilization. I think these two ideas merge, and the fact that Bengalis think that they're different no longer holds true. I think Bengal also wants to rediscover its past, a past that is so intrinsically linked to the past of India. There are other issues, of course. The book is divided into several chapters, so there are immediate issues. Issues like corruption, issues like deteriorating law and order situation, issues of like joblessness, issues like the continuing corona crisis, Amphan, which happened last year, and how the state government reacted to Amphan and after. But those are immediate political reactions to Mamata Banerjee's government. But if that's the top layer, beneath it, there is a Bengal that is almost bursting at the seams, wanting to come out, express itself, and merge with the idea of a larger India. And with that need to be part of a larger idea, I think this whole idea of Bengali exceptionalism goes for a toss. I think that for me, while researching for this book, a book which is like you said, which has a sell-by date, it's a book on election. That for me was a very interesting thing to hear and observe. That how we try to, it's not just about wanting to come back to Bengal, like a lot of non-resident Bengalis like me want to. It is not just about wanting your state to be viewed differently, not just about better healthcare, more jobs, better law and order situation. All of those things are important. But this idea to revisit your past, to merge with the present, which in large parts of India now is very different, and to go ahead with that civilizational ethos in mind, I think is the most important discovery for me in this book.
Okay, thank you, Deep. That was a very interesting, insightful introduction to the book. Apart from talking of a host of issues, what essentially you have been stressing upon happens to be the very Bengali identity, where essentially, I mean, how do we trace the origin of this Bengali identity? Is it 1977 with the coming of the left, or the origin essentially lies with Bankim Chandra Anandamot, or much prior to that? So now, of course, this is something. This is a very important defining factor as far as this election is concerned, no doubt about that. So, with that, let me come to Niranjan. Uh, Niranjan, in fact, being a political scientist and a keen observer of Indian politics, uh, how do you reckon this? So, where is Bengal? I'm not going to ask this question that where is Bengal heading to, but what has essentially led Bengal to what we are today? Whereas, suppose, say, as you and I often have this conversation that see in 2001, look at what Orissa was, because you also have hail from Orissa, and I am a big admirer of Naveen Babu in some way or the other. So from 2001 to 2021, Odisha has progressed so much, but what has essentially made Bengal stay back where it is? Is it only the question of Bengali identity, where it goes back to 1977, relating itself to the left? Or is it something else? Or there are various other drivers that essentially held it back? So over to you, Niranjan.
Thank you, Nilanjan. And thanks, Deep, for illustrating, the key objective of, setting the context of your book, and what are the main sort of motivation that actually made you to, pen this fascinating book. I would call it's a kind of, mix of both journalistic talent and a typical, oral historian that is hiding in you. So I think you have combined it to the best possible extent. And for a hardcore researcher, academic like me, reading all those sort of books and articles with long reference and, sort of factual lay, this was actually a very sort of easy read. In fact, Ambar shared me the ebook last week, and I actually finished it in just 2-3 sittings, because I mean, each chapter they're not very longish and not with no heavy with any kind of factual or data other thing, but lovely narratives, and they make profound sense actually, even with small illustration. Like one chapter I read about Nusrat Jahan, and that question of Muslim identity and how what kind of transformation that is happening there. The othering of Muslim. I think a very powerful chapter. It's very short, kind of punchy chapter, but the kind of impact that it leaves on a reader. Someone who really doesn't understand so much actually Bengal. It was actually so easy to connect with what's happening, especially what you are actually hinting at about the two classing vision of the idea of India, the one that has been saved since 1947, and the one that was actually for several centuries, basically waiting for a kind of break. So in a sense, we are actually witnessing two classic vision of India, and that you have, I think, captured very well. So I think especially all the 10 chapters I read, I think one thing that I could actually easily see is that uh, your running theme is basically a changed Bengal. How much Bengal has changed in the last 7 or decades, and especially with 34 years of left rule and the 10 years of TMC's rule. Those are actually something which has found a kind of a major sort of emphasis in your sort of book. But I think I won't actually go by chapter, but I think a couple of chapters that I found very striking, and which actually remains, I think, at the heart of Bengal's predicament, and what you call that Bengal exceptionalism, and it's earning for a new kind of sort of identity. I think many of them actually found a sort of place in chapter 6, where you look at the role played by the religious identity, and in which a state where you have Muslim population is almost about 30%, and vote bank politics and appeasement and whatever we name it actually, and then the secular politics of the left, all that I mean, in many ways are producing and creating a kind of so I would say a new wave of politics that this particular election has witnessed. And I think result probably on 2nd May would actually tell us, how far actually we have able to understood the undercurrents, the undercurrents which you have actually captured from your own personal experience, as well as, through, talking to people who have been, active participant in those sort of phenomena. I think one would see actually on 2nd May. But I think what observation you have made on some of those aspects, I think are very valuable for understanding what is going through the Bengali identity, the different layers of Bengali identity. It cannot be just called in one or two, even a book won't be able to capture the kind of complexities. And especially the one where I think I to a great extent benefited is about the history of right, especially the the Sangh Parivar, how it has actually catapulted. Because if you look at it had a base, it had a fantastic kind of record earlier, in several decades back. Especially if you look at even pre-partition, debate and other things, and then the active role played by Sam Prasad Mukherjee, other thing which you have actually brought in, discussion. I think. And then connecting with what's happening in the last decade and odd, in which the right wing is trying to spread its sort of a presence in different parts of the Bengal. I think I think you have done a great job. I think if I am correct, I have seen actually a lot of in fact analysts have actually picked up many of your lines actually, and it has come prominently in many of those newspaper op-ed writings. In fact, so in that sense, you have been a pioneer. But beyond this, I think what I actually liked is that the treatment you are given to some of the topics, like, which usually, I mean, one reads a op-ed piece and, just lives there, like, Amphan, COVID, the way Trinamool Congress government has handled some of those, and that in many way exposes, the limitations of this regime. And in many ways, this also has become campaign narrative of the BJP. So I think those chapters you have given, I mean, it could have been probably done even more comprehensively, but I think you are writing a book, you are not writing a book on Amphan or a book on, COVID, that could be a separate book, in fact, especially if what I have attracted about the way Bengal handled Amphan and the way Odisha handled Amphan. I think one can write actually to a book actually comparing Odisha and Bengal sort of way. But the most, I think, important chapters, I think, even for Nilanjan also to, in fact, after the election result, in fact, we need to think of is what the basic framework which Deep has provided about economic development of Bengal, and then law and disorder. That's an interesting chapter. I mean, law and disorder. What actually, if you compare that actually, especially with neighboring Odisha or even Bihar under Nitish Kumar, I think this is where also, I mean, why some of these backward states have actually made remarkable progress on many, indicators in last, I would say 15 years is largely, it's about, boils down to law and order, the stability and the rule of law, which actually a foundation, to economic growth and, providing a kind of governance, which unfortunately we haven't seen actually any kind of semblance of, law and order in Bengal in many ways. Actually, if you look at just connected with the political violence and the kind of patronage system that has, flourished, and in a way what we saw in 2018 Bengal Panchayat election, these are in many ways says what's actually wrong with the state system, with the regime, and approach of the particular party that is in power. So in a sense, if one has to see what is actually what the Bengal should do in 2021, I think some of your insights actually can be a fantastic inputs on which one can expand further. I think to close my, because I can go on speaking, because I really enjoyed reading this book. Couple of area where I thought actually probably you could have maybe if you have opportunity in future, probably I think to deal more comprehensively is on issues of again identity, that othering of Muslim, because that's something for many of us outside who have been observing that if you compare states like Uttar Pradesh or Gujarat or Bihar, many other states where we have seen communal riots and communal tensions have become actually a kind of a phenomena. It's and it has ravaged those societies, and it has actually greatly disrupted, because harmony, social cohesion is very fundamental. And that is something, the other part of India have not heard much, from the Bengal, because Bengal narrative, especially under left, 34 years rule, that secular narrative, other thing which you have actually tried to expose, it's, sort of duplicity and other thing. I think it needs actually far more comprehensive treatment. And especially another thing, which in fact I've also been writing for last couple of years, is about polarization. The polarization narrative, which, a lot of people have written about this particular Bengal election, about how polarization has become a major tool, especially for the rise of BJP, and both BJP as well as Trinamool, they have actually equally played the polarization card in different way, in different contexts. I think this is also one area probably where you can actually probably expand further and probably throw us more insights. But having said that, I would say this is a fantastic work, and it has actually opened a wider canvas of thoughts, and probably many of these things, actually your sort of insights can actually help us to if we look at a sort of a policy sort of suggestion for West Bengal 2021. I think your book provides a nice pathway actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan. That was essentially a very good critique of the book, I would say, and quite comprehensive. Uh, no doubt about that. So, well, there are of course takeaways, major takeaways, which we are going to discuss, in fact, in course of this discussion and later on as well, along with Deep and various other panelists, because we are now connected with each other. That's true. Now, Shreya, let me just come to you on your, not only about your perceptions on the book, but what are your generic feeling on the various drivers of the 2021 Bengal 2021 elections, and how does essentially this book capture that? To what extent has it been successful to do that?
Good evening. A big thank you to ORF Kolkata for making me a part of this important discussion. Hello to all the participants, and Deep, thanks for writing this book, because had you not done so, we wouldn't be having a detailed discussion on Bengal. Now, see, before I answer your question, Nilanjan, let me tell you a bit about what I think about think tanks and the role of journalists here. Think tanks like ORF, they play a very unique role in understanding the economic and the socio-political big picture and in coming up with recommendations. But having worked in think tanks, my observation is that despite all the hard work that goes into researching, analyzing, and writing, sometimes those white papers are hardly read and even less understood. I know that there are some new marketing techniques now with the think tanks use to reach to people. They dish out statistics and information through infographics, and they make these short concept videos, but they still appear formal and removed. Now, that is one big reason why bringing in anecdotes and giving numbers a human face always helps and makes their work more relatable. And therein comes in the need for journalists turned writers who are good at telling stories, human stories. So I'm very glad that we are having this discussion on this book, Bengal 2021, and in trying to situate it in the context of the broader changes coming over in West Bengal. Now, this book has been written in the form of an election diary, and it has dropped right before the 2021 assembly elections. But its true significance, in my opinion, lies in the fact that it is something that goes beyond the elections. It is a book that dares to ask a list of thorny questions that Bengal has shied away from for the last 40 or 50 years. And while a list can sound boring, this book is anything but, because each important question or topic discussed has been wrapped in a story of the different conversations the author has had with a diverse group of people in the state. I think ultimately it's a book about Bengal, its past, present, and its future. It nudges people in the state to opt for a reality check, and it starts conversations that help people introspect, understand their flaws, and if possible, to course correct for a better future. Now, I'm sure that it couldn't have been an easy book to write It must have enraged some friends and colleagues because it does away with several stereotypes and shakes the intellectuals of Bengal out of their cozy, lazy complacency. But it does bring forth the reality that Bengal is not just Kolkata. It's much bigger than that, and it brings out those voices from the rural and suburban areas of Bengal that don't often find place in mainstream media. Now, this election, whatever be the outcome, what this book brings out in the light is that for a change, the rural Bengal is asserting itself. They're voicing their opinion. The minority communities are no longer content being just vote banks. They're demanding a seat at the high table of power, and they're asserting and experimenting politically. And this is something new, and the book captures that very well. Now, see where I come from. I'm settled in the US for the last 18 years. And whenever I've traveled back, I have seen Kolkata change a bit. And I've yearned to go back to a Kolkata that I can identify with, that I'm used to. But the ground realities have changed a lot. And I've been talking to some friends in Kolkata, Bengali, and both Bengali and non-Bengali, and they come, they fall in the whole spectrum is covered. Some of them are left-leaning, some of them are right-leaning, some of them are more centered. All of them tell me when I repeatedly, complain that I miss Kolkata, they say, let that remain a lovely dream. Don't come back. Some of them, not like all of them, unanimously, they tell me that not to return because they are not very hopeful about the future of the state. Now, grasping the latest political and social developments in Bengal from a faraway continent is not simple. Of course, there's no dearth of news articles reaching us through internet, but getting to know the ground reality is a privilege we have forgotten all about, people here. And that's why I think this book, this nuanced book, is so important to us. Bengal has had a very problematic relationship with Poriborton, with change, it seems. Many Bengalis have left Bengal, settled in other parts of India. They have migrated to other countries and truly moved up and on with their lives. Yet they still hold the special place for the state, for Bengal they have left behind. In their minds, Bengal is frozen in time. And they want to preserve it that way for selfish reasons, for nostalgia. And what they miss is how the systems, how the law and order, how the ease of doing business, earning a living, getting a permit for anything, building a house, they don't work in the state. And this is causing strain for the folks still living in Bengal. And I think it's really selfish for Bengalis to want Bengal not to change, while the rest of the states in the country and also the world have changed and moved on. Now, last month in Indian Express, Pratap Bhanu Mehta, he wrote an article where he discussed how West Bengal's revolutionary and progressive self-images hid the 4 C's of politics, of its politics: caste, communalism, corruption, and coercion. Bengal 2021 discusses all the 4 C's. And it also shows how the 4 contradictions are homegrown and they have not been exported from outside the state, and how they have been developing bit by bit. It's not that overnight things have changed. Yet the one adamant comment I've been reading and hearing in the conversations that Deep covers is Bengal is not like that. So I think, the book shows how bipolar Bengalis can be when it comes to their political views. Yet, with time, the binaries of secular versus communalism, left versus right, have become diluted. And right now, many people fall somewhere in the middle, the voters in Bengal. And that is what makes this election so difficult to predict. I will stop right there and allow others to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Sreya. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Uh, Very interesting, in fact, intervention. Just a few days back, just because you were talking about Poriborton, the change, in fact, and we are so apathetic to change. At times, I recall around a month back, in fact, I was invited to a Bengali television program, and there was a Bengali movie director. And the television program was all about Kolkata of your dreams, Shopner Kolkata. So how do you want to see Kolkata of your dreams? So the Bengali movie director said that the present Kolkata আমার কুৎসিত লাগে. I find this Kolkata ugly, and it has become uglier over the last 10 years because I only see white and blue buildings all across. This is not the Kolkata that that I would like to see. Now he, of course, has been he belongs to the leftist regime, and he belongs to the leftist thinking. So and somebody else, a film actor, stated in that particular program that I want to recreate the 90s. I want to have a shooting, in fact, for the 90s Kolkata, and I don't find a building or a space which can reflect on the Kolkata of the 90s because everything is blue and white at this point in time. So, where essentially lies the identity of Kolkata? Probably, are we really thinking about Kolkata from the perspective of the red buildings, or are we really thinking of Kolkata from the perspective of those that prevailed in the 1960s? Or because there was another professor who happens to be a former principal of one of the most cherished institutions of Kolkata, and he was talking about, I want to see the green grass and the trams going on, tram lines on those green grass. So everybody has their own perception, has their own dreams of the Kolkata of their dreams. So naturally, it is when you're facing all these kinds of a very motley kind of of a crowd, you find that you can never really achieve a Kolkata which can serve the needs of all the dreams. So anyway, whether we are apathetic to Poriborton or not, time will state, but the fact remains that we have to keep up with the times as well, apart from retaining our tradition and culture. Well, Koral, on that ground, I move to you because you have also left Kolkata like Shreya years back. And I don't know when you last came to the city, but the fact remains you keep on visiting the city. So do you really find not only the city, but the state changing? Is it changing for the good or the bad? And what do you aspire as far as the city or the state is concerned, as far as aspirational Bengal goes?
Thank you, Nilanjan, and thank you, OR, for this brilliant session and for inviting me in it. Before I go into my idea of Bengal, let me tell Deep that many people have asked me whether this book is talking about elections 2021, is talking about BJP winning the elections. And I had to correct many people saying that the cover might be a little misleading, but the book doesn't impose its thoughts on you, whatever be the writer's personal belief. The book is about how certain pockets have got saffronized in a place which till few years ago didn't exist. So I found the book extremely well written. I have spoken about this in the past, that I found the book having a very nuanced voice, the voice of a researcher and not an imposer, not any kind of imposer which shoves things down the throat, but very beautifully places the argument, but in a very firm voice. I say firm, I use the word firm very consciously because I found that each and every argument made is backed by thorough research and not personal ideation or personal fact creation, if I may use that word. Coming to Nilanjan's question, when in one of my books, which was written quite some years ago, and those days I was in Mumbai, I was trying to understand how would a person who is not from Bengal look at Bengal, and look at Bengalis for that matter. How does that person perceive? And I figured that there are three kinds of Bengalis. And these three kinds are, one is foreign, something that Deep was talking about, a typical Bengal snobbery, which believes that the other states and people who are not Bengalis are Phaltu people, and only the Bengalis exist with their intellectualism, with their reach, with their upbringing, with wherever they come from, their history, everything. The second category is the Desi. The first category, when I say foreign, the snobbery, they are the people who will utter at the drop of a hat that when I was in Britain, when I was in Athens, when I was in USA, they talk like that. The second category is Desi. These are the people who wake up, switch on the radio, hear Rabindra Sangeet, don't utter a word without Uttam Kumar and Suchitra Sen, believe that they are still in the era which can be inspired by Isha Chandra Vidyashagar, and doesn't want to move beyond Satyajit Ray. The third category is comrade. They are forever angry. They don't know what they are angry about, but they're angry. Whatever you say, they find a reason to be angry. So, you know, what I feel about Bengal often is that there is a term that we grew up hearing. That term is, in Bengali, the term is Hujuge Bangali, the passionate Bengali. They are passionate in everything without knowing the passion behind it at times. They are very argumentative, very angry, very robust in trying to establish who they are and where they come from, but very unrelated to the present situation where they are in. Unfortunately, that hasn't changed. Bengal remains right there. We are still Hujuge. Whatever comes, whatever new comes, we are very close to it. We try to oppose it because we believe that opposition is our strength, and opposition, bidroho, is our, the revolution is our underlying language. Whether that revolution makes sense or not, or how much logic based is that revolution, depends on person to person. I have often seen that the logic dwindles when it comes to being a revolutionary Bengali. You don't, I mean, that is my personal belief, that you don't always have to be shouting from rooftops in order to bring a revolution. Most of the revolutionaries from Bengal did not do that. And the Bengali whose name is taken over and over again did not shout from rooftops. All he had to do was reject the Nobel Prize. He didn't shout from rooftop. So now where it leaves me as a person settled outside Bengal, but still holding on to the state as its daughter, believing that that is the place where I will eventually go back to, or that is the place I am born. I mean, that is the place which bears my identity and will bear my identity till I die. Having come from that kind of a mindset, there are, of course, certain things that I would like to see in Bengal, or certain changes that I would like to see in Bengal. First is, I have seen, I mean, when I was growing up, I have seen that Bengalis love to live with some kind of detachment, in the sense that, they are very apologetic about their achievements. They don't like to talk about their achievements. I mean, today, if I think we have many Bengalis in the panel, I'm sorry, Niranjan, if I am talking about Bengalis in this way, since you are not one. What happens, our parents don't talk about us or our achievements too much in public or too much to their peers, because they find it a crime. There is a very good thing about it. There's a very bad thing about it. Bad thing because people don't get to know what we have achieved. And the good thing about it is the sheer humility, which is the reason, or which is the underlying thing behind it. But since times are changing and the rest of the world is changing, this lack of communication, I would term it as a communication, a communication error by today's date, by today's sensibilities, that if we don't know how to communicate about ourselves with responsibility and with with some kind of responsibility, if we can't communicate about our achievements, about where we are going, then we are probably underestimating and undermining ourselves. And a lot of people don't get to know. And this could be an individual thing that I'm saying, but when this happens with everyone, it becomes a collective issue. So a lot of Bengalis have probably not spoken about their achievements in Bengal, and that is why a lot of people don't know that what is happening in Bengal, and whether the beautiful things happening in Bengal are worth celebrating in a greater space. I do believe that there must be many such achievements which are totally suppressed because culturally we have believed that we must not talk about our achievements, others should. Others will talk about it only when they know. If they don't know, they'll not. So there should be a communication replanning. Secondly, now, as an author, I would love to see more and more people, more and more Bengalis, not restricting themselves to Bengali writing only. And that has never happened. We have always been exposed to world literature. We have been taught to, appreciate world literature. But what I do feel is, I have often heard this comparison of Tagore with Shakespeare. It's very stupid. It's not required. We don't need to say that so-and-so is in Bengal's Tennyson. We really, really need to come out of this mindset which says that so-and-so writer is, Srijato is so good, he is Bengal's Tennyson. I still see those things. It's stupid. I would like to see as an author that world authors are celebrated in Bengal and Bengali authors are celebrated across the world. And I have also seen that the literature festivals that happen in Bengal are often very closed to authors outside Bengal. If that could change, I would be very happy. Next, as an art lover, I have been very vocal about saying this, that sitting in Bombay, I don't get to see a lot of films that get released in Bengal. And my mother tells me over the phone that such and such film is amazing, you should see it. And that film doesn't release in Bengal. That is because either because of the lack of funds or because of the lack of, the lack of thinking big. The South has done it in a beautiful way. Their films are celebrated in different parts of India. Today they dub their films in Hindi or they sell the rights. And they do it through a proper channel, which ensures that the content of that region gets viewed by different regions across the country, other than, of course, across the world. So I don't probably need to say that how big a brand Rajnikant is or how big a brand Kamal Hassan is in the rest of India. And that is not because whatever they have done in the Hindi film space. That is because what they have done in the regional film space. I would love to see Abir Chatterjee. I would love to see Nusrat Jahan and many others, Rituparna Sengupta and many others, to be more robustly available to the consumers across India so that their talent, Kaushik Ganguly, so that their talent gets discussed in a larger medium. And a few Bengalis don't fight for space in national online or offline journals for allowing a review to publish so that people know that such kind of a film exists. Finally, as a woman, this is something that no political party ever talks about. They never pick up this particular aspect in their promises before the elections. That is about minimizing crimes against women. Nobody wants to touch it because I think that's not a promise that they believe they can fulfill. And that is the biggest hopelessness that a country like India can have. If there's one complaint, the biggest complaint that I would have against Mamata Banerjee is that being a woman leader who has been discussed from different aspects, she has not been discussed as the woman who has stood up for crimes against women, who has stood up to enhance women's safety in the state, or who has stood up to talk about women's safety as a voice that cannot be curbed. That is my biggest complaint against Mamata Banerjee as a woman. And finally, as I end, I would like to say that whenever it is about Bengal elections, whenever it is about things that Mamata Banerjee is doing, the memes that get made, the funny way in which she speaks Hindi or English, the things that are not agreed by the rest of India, they get amply discussed all across India and even all across the world. What doesn't get discussed is such situations like Amphan, when when Bengal needed Indian media. Nobody actually came up, and there was rather one voice I don't want to name, and many others supported her. That person had written on Twitter that many other places have many other natural disasters. Why does Bengal always cry that it has not got? I don't think that Bengal is a crybaby, but I do believe that it needed a more robustly planned communication. Many stupid things get communicated in a way as if it is a SOS issue. Many have done it. I think communication is something that Bengal needs to grow up with. We are very good in English, you know. I remember when I was in school, a teacher once told me, and I still hold that very close to my heart, and I always quote her. She said that,
You
listen,
just have to
I
wrap
am.
up
This
it.
is my. I remember that she said that as a Bengali, it's fine if you are not good at grammar, if you are not good at Bakaran, or if you are not good in Bengali. But as a Bengali, if you don't have flawless grammar, and if you have not read Shakespeare, I'm sorry, you are a foolish Bengali. You don't qualify to be a Bengali. So I think we need to shift a little bit of our attention from English and concentrate on communication. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Touched upon a host of issues. In fact, I was just wondering when you were talking about the cover of this particular book, that whether it really reflects the saffron or not. I don't know. No, one should not essentially conclude about a book from its cover, but of course, maybe from its conclusion, where it says that the sun has almost set now, and is it just me or is the sky a shade of saffron? So I, I don't know what deep essentially means out of this, but anyway, Ambar, so just yesterday, you and Niranjan wrote this article on welfare populism of Mamta and competitive populism of BJP. So where do we stand now, and where are we heading?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh. Right at the outset, I would like to congratulate Mr. Halder for his very, very fascinating book. And I think we till now had a very, very interesting discussion on political culture and Bengal's political culture. So I have barely anything to add on that. But I think I would touch a little bit on the discourse on development and politics of development. Mr. Haldar has touched upon a wide range of issues, which has heavily shaped the dynamics of Bengal elections. What made me particularly, very, very, thoughtful is how the issue of development evolved, through the chapters of the book, in various ways, and finally found its most vivid manifestation in the last chapter on Shingu. So I would like to, ponder a bit more on that. How the entire narrative of development in this election has kind of transpired, and how the entire rhetoric of development, is going to be shaped in Bengal in the future, and how the election is going to impact that narrative of development. To my mind, I think three aspects, become very crucial if you look at how the narrative of development has kind of played out in the entire Bengal elections. I think those three aspects are politics of welfare, politics of identity, and the politics of aspiration. I think it is a very complex interaction and intermixing of these three aspects, which kind of makes kind of shapes how the narrative of development in Bengal politics is kind of evolving presently. First, I would look at the welfare policies of Mamata Banerjee, as Dr. Ghosh stated that it was just yesterday that Dr. Sahoo and I did a very short piece on her welfare populism, which touches upon almost every aspect of everyday life, starting from education, health, food, shelter, all kind of these social safety, measures, cash transfers, etc. So this has been one of the major plank, for the TMC to kind of campaign, uh, and played a very major driver in Mamta's bid, for her victory for the third time in the state. Uh, it is this welfare politics, or what we might also term as welfare populism or freebie politics, whatever we might kind of like to call it. But this entire narrative of welfareism, Mamta's variant of welfareism, has also been, mediated and, and also been marred by very serious allegations of corruption, local illegal commission, being charged for these local for these the social safety nets. So this has definitely been a narrative which BJP has kind of, very effectively, brought to the forefront. That what are the limitations of Mamta's welfare? Despite the fact that how, it has touched upon everyday life, it has shown very deep-rooted drawbacks, which definitely, makes a very important poll plank for the BJP. Now, this Mamta's welfareism is very deeply, interlinked, which also came, in a very fascinating way in Mr. Haldar's, book, in some of the chapters, that how politics of identity kind of shaped the narrative of development. Because, welfare politics, or it is once more a reminder for all of us that politics of welfare, politics of, redistribution, development never exist in a silo. It is always, very deeply enmeshed with the politics of identity. And that's what we see in a variety of reports, that ground reports that we see from Bengal on, during the, Bengal elections, and also before that, that a section, a very dominant section of population has been quite, who are disillusioned with Mamta's variant of welfareism, also talks about, how minority appeasement has, also kind of deterred her politics of redistribution, in the sense that, there has been very serious allegations that the minorities, the Muslims, have got more, than some section of the Hindus in the rural Bengal, as far as these welfare policies are concerned. So this is how, the politics of identity, got mediated the politics of welfare. And the third aspect is of course the element of aspiration, or aspirational politics. Here, a very interesting aspect about aspiration here is how aspiration evolves with time, and how aspiration is also relative across various sections of the society. There has been a plethora of narratives where it has been repeatedly said that yes, we got many of the schemes that Mamta's government has kind of brought about. We have got that, but what about, but these are basic needs. Food is a basic need, shelter is a basic need, free education is a basic need. What about employment? What about long-term development? What about industrialization? So aspiration has also kind of evolved with time, and that is where I think BJP is also trying to very seriously tap in, and it will be very interesting to see how all these three factors, which has heavily shaped the narrative of development in the political discourse during the Bengal campaign, how that is going to evolve as the results come out on 2nd May. Because definitely it will be very interesting to look at which variant of development kind of is kind of winning, which is whether it is Mamta's style of welfare populism, which would kind of see through the day, or it is the BJP's variant of development, which, BJP has fought the election, based on the slogan, Bikash Hobe. So it will be very, very interesting to see that, whether this variant of development, appeals to the increasingly aspirational class of Bengal. And this is also going to, be a very, very important food for thought for us, as researchers, to look at that how, the politics of development and politics of identity is, taking very, very interesting, very, very complicated, problematic manifestations in various, parts of the country, and especially in Bengal, and how that is going to shape the entire narrative of development in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambar. In fact, so we had very, very different kinds of reviews or critiques, or suppose presentations on the theme which centers around Deep's book. Well, I think there are some comments as well as questions. Now, there is this question in here from Mr. Ranjit Rai, which says that after hearing all comments, so far I asked the writer or any of the panelists that if TMC wins or if BJP wins, what will that prove of India? Is it a sex-centered India, or is it becoming a new India? So, are we going to see regime change? Are we going to see a state which is more aligned to India, or are we going to see a new India? So what we can do is maybe all the panelists, including Deep, respond within 2 minutes. Deep, I start with you.
Regime change, that would be difficult to say, but I think if the exit polls are to be believed, if Trinamool Congress just about manages to sort of retain power, somehow just about manages to retain power, it would be something very new to Bengal politics, Nilanjan. Because when was the last time you have seen such a powerful opponent in Bengal politics? Imagine 500, between 105 and 150 strong, opposition, BJP in the opposition. I think it would be a political mess, so to say. I think the ideally there should have been a decisive election. Whoever won, whether it's the Trinamool Congress or the BJP, should have won very decisively. But as opposition this strong, we'll have to wait and watch. If Trinamool Congress somehow manages to retain power, how it goes on from there. If the BJP wins, they have done some tall promises. The first thing they need to do, of course, is to tackle what they're tackling in every other part of the country, the corona crisis. They will have no excuse whatsoever to sort of from day one to try and change things, to improve law and order situation, to end syndicate Raj, which they have alleged runs in Bengal. And this double engine Sarkar, now they of course, I mean, if they come to power, they can't say that it's Kendra Dosh, like all political parties have said in Bengal. It's they conveniently blame the center. So they have to get the ground running and deliver on all their promises. And I just hope that whoever wins, we look at very different Bengal from what we have looked at for 34 years before, and the past 10 years, the past 10 years. And that's all we can hope for.
Thank you. Niranjan, what happens if BJP wins? You need to unmute.
Yeah. It's quite a tough question, actually. I mean, if BJP wins, it is, going to be, kind of, it's going to be very, I think, simple and straightforward, the kind of elements that we are witnessing in BJP ruled states. So it will be, again, same narrative which the question, the person who was raised about, New India, or one nation, one law, one tax, or a typical sort of homogenization and sort of uniform way of looking at many things actually. So I think so that's I mean one hypothetical one can actually say, but I think it's not going to be that easy. I mean the way actually what Deep actually said, because if this election results becomes very close, let's say, thing would be very different, whether it's Trinamool or BJP in power, because it's going to be probably much more messier, to govern the state, because we have already seen the kind of polarization. It's unprecedented polarization. Bengal has had a different kind of polarization earlier, even when left was ruling or even Trinamool was in power in the early years of Trinamool. That was a different kind of polarization. But now it's a polarization of a different kind actually. So on each and every major aspects of Bengal, whether it's about identity, whether it's about even providing services, those basic services, you will actually see a kind of different narrative that will be peddled, and which will complicate actually even for normal governance to run. So I'm saying I'm going to see a probably much more messier kind of governance system, and but there is also hope. If Trinamool is able to retain the power, I think it will be probably a different Trinamool altogether than what it is actually for last 10 years. The arrogance, the manner in which it was ruling, I think there'll be probably a change in the political violence, that trend which we have been witnessing, because that has also become one of the key reasons, of Trinamool on back foot, actually the backlash, BJP gaining and left and other going to BJP in a sense that to take sort of take on Trinamool, they have no choice, so they have compromised their ideology and join with the right wing. So in a sense, this would probably see a change. Probably you'll see a different kind of government its approach to many of those issues. I mean, hypothetically, but we don't know, because the person who would be ruling probably will remain the same with similar instinct and other thing. But we might see a change. And the second interesting thing that can happen is actually in terms of governance, in terms of corruption, that service delivery, which we are talking, I mean, Amber and we have been discussing about, I think would also see a change. In fact, probably we'll see much more cleaner, accountable governance in days to come, because this is where actually Trinamool also has been, in many ways, there have been massive actually scrutiny of Trinamool's performance, the leakages, that cut the money culture and all that actually has given a bad name to Trinamool. And in fact, a lot of Trinamool MLAs who defected from the party also in many ways have, this is also something which they have been saying. So I think these two aspects you might see a change, but not many other things that, probably what we think in terms of development narrative changing, or that all of a sudden Trinamool will become pro-industry, and I think those narratives won't actually change that drastically, because structural requirements are very different.
I know, I think a lot of hope is being assigned to this election. I don't think a big miracle is possible, because so much has happened. There are some bad habits that Bengal has developed over the years. So and also there is this chance of a hung assembly. What happens then? There's going to be more confusion there. I hope we don't get to see that scenario, but what if? So whoever wins or whatever is the situation, there's going to be what is going to follow is a lot of confusion politically. I'm hoping that doesn't get too much out of hand. Now, if TMC manages to win the third time, it has a lot of work in front of itself. First of all, it has to do a thorough house cleaning. I think the party itself needs rebooting and a lot of reorganization. Whether Mamata Banerjee is capable, her ego is capable of taking that, I don't know. But perhaps she has learned a bit from what has happened in the last 2-3 years. And also, just forming a good team for Trinamool Congress, if it's possible, bringing in new people, specialists, experts, that could give us more hope moving forward. But they just have a very a tall order in front of them. Now, if BJP wins, for the first time in the history of Bengal, I think this state versus center animosity is going to disappear. And that is going to take a lot of pressure out of this whole optics, this whole game, this blame game. And I think so much goes into, so much of energy is wasted in just dealing with this ego, this ego tussle. So that would be good in that way. But BJP would have to learn more about Bengal. BJP, I in one of the presentations, I think it was a while back, I heard that it's like if you are a tea grower, if you grow tea, the different flavors in different states. Bengal flavor is very different. So one has to understand the Bengal nuances, and it's not just cultural; it's political, it's historical, the use of slogans, how you manipulate people, how you get to them. They have a lot of learning to do. And only then I think they will be able to unfold their program. So either party winning, they have a tall task in front of them, different kind of tasks. And I hope whoever wins is up to that task.
Koral?
Nilanjan, I think Shreya has beautifully put it. I don't want to waste time by repeating. I think whoever wins or whoever loses will have to deal with Mahua Maitro, and that won't be easy. Let's move on from there.
Ambar, is this going to be the end of an era of conflictual federalism, or are we going to see the continuity of what prevails, or are we going to see a changed Trinamool?
I think I agree with all the panelists, regarding the impact and the repercussions. First of all, if Mamta manages to retain power somehow, then there will be no room for complacency at all. She has to, as Shreya rightly pointed out, that she has to, revamp her organization. There's barely anything left. She has to, kind of do a very serious introspection and course correction in order to have things in order. And the entire, I will not even call it, I will not call it, conflictual federalism only. This is something called acrimonious federalism. There's this bitter, kind of incessant rant, quarrel, which goes on between the two center and the state highest leadership. Federalism is about checks and balances. Federalism as an institutional structure is not about unanimity. It's not about natural, consensus. It is about these checks and balances. Center would say manage with 200. State will say no, give me 350. So this is how it should be. But the kind of political culture that that has that we have witnessed in the recent past and also evolving now, it is an absolutely bitter kind of a personality clash, and that is not a problem of federalism. That is a problem of political culture, and that needs to change. No matter because federalism is here to stay. And if BJP comes to power, of course, there will be more consensus on the central and state domain. Definitely. But I'm also very very curious to understand that how it is not going to be very easy for the BJP to settle the leadership question. As they have to reckon with the new BJP versus old BJP dichotomy, and that they accommodate everybody who have crossed over and is aspiring for share of power. And secondly, of course, it is definitely not going to be a very very tempting situation to have Mamta Banerjee as the opposition leader. Because I don't think that she's going to make, if at all BJP comes to power, she's going to make their life any easy. So that is also going to be a very very big challenge for the BJP. Anyways, whoever comes to power, I think it is going to be we are going to have a very very formidable opposition who will constant act as a very very effective check, which is very healthy for democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, in fact, to all the panelists. It's a pity that we couldn't take various questions and comments. There have been a host of comments. Rather, the questions that have come, in fact, the issue is that, see, we are essentially an objective platform, and we try to accommodate a host of contending issues as far as this platform is concerned. It is not that we are aligned to any particular dispensation or any particular school of thought. Rather, we have all the schools of thought presenting their views here, but at the same time we try to avoid any kind of acrimonious debates or any kind of personal attacks which essentially result in some kind of a degradation of this particular platform. uh, so this is one thing that often we need to keep in mind while we respond to some of the questions and the comments that are being raised in this particular platform. So in fact, if one notes the kind of responses that we had from our panelists, they had been very objective. Of course, everybody had their own positions. We don't know what is going to prevail in future. We really don't know how, in fact, whether it's going to be a changed Trinamool, or is it going to be the same Trinamool? Is it going to be the BJP? But we have our own expectations. We do have our own aspirations. We want to essentially cling to our rich culture. At the same time, we want the emergence of a new Bengal, which is going to be at par with all other all other states which have made significant progress over the last 20, 30 years. So today, in fact, the proverb that used to prevail before, that what Bengal thinks tomorrow, what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow, simply is no more valid. We really want to relive that. So are we going to see that in the forthcoming future? Only time is going to tell us. But let's wait for May 2nd and let's see what is in store for us. So thank you, all the panelists. Thanks to all the participants who have been present here, and I'm extremely apologetic to all of you because it has not been possible to accommodate all the questions or the comments given the limited time. I hope to see you again, in fact, in this platform of the Friday afternoon talk, which we hold occasionally as far as ORF Kolkata is concerned.